Audit has identified more than $1 billion in potential fraud, waste, and abuse in about 4 years of Minnesota Medicaid claims.
22 years, spotless record, and you're being punished for it right now.
We're going to be shut down because people stole money.
Should any top government officials go to jail over this?
I would say that Governor Walz should at least step down right now.
Hello, everybody. We need to talk about what's going on again in Minnesota. While everyone is being focused on everything else, talking about fraud, the billions that have been stolen from the Feeding Our Future, the housing scams, and the daycare schemes, there's a deeper story that's not getting enough attention. The Tim Walz administration let fraud run wild for years, and now the people who are paying the price aren't necessarily the fraudsters, because at this point, yes, they have some more arrests, but there definitely need to be more. The real victims are the legitimate providers who have been doing everything right. It's the disabled kids who are about to lose the only services that actually work for them. Let's get into it. After years of letting fraud schemes steal billions, and I mean billions from the state programs, the Walz administration finally decided to do something, right? So in October 2025, they hired a company to audit 14 high-risk Medicaid programs, including autism services. The audit came back in February 2026, and the numbers were bad, really bad. 90%, I repeat, 90% of autism programs claims were flagged.
Optum has audited the billing for the 14 high-risk services that are within the Department of Human Services. They're using AI and they're using their own data analytics to try and find any of that fraud, waste, and abuse. And they did find soft spots in all 14 programs, but especially in the one that includes autism services. Their data analytics there flagged 90% of the claims as having potential problems.
Now, keyword is flag. Doesn't mean that 90% were fraudulent, but what it means is that Minnesota's policies were just so poorly written, so vague, that the audit analysis couldn't even verify whether the claims were legitimate or not. So think about that. The state had policies so weak, they literally couldn't tell good providers from the scammers. So what did Minnesota do? They implemented a 90-day payment freeze on all 14 programs until they figure it out.
It also found more than $1 billion in claims that may require an additional review of records to determine if they were medically necessary payments. And it says the state saved about $166 million in the last 3 months of 2025 by using prepayment reviews. Now, it's a year-long audit, so it's only about a quarter done at this point, but leaders at the Department of Human Services say it's definitely going to help them try and curb any future fraud.
Using Optum and this new technology to be able to respond in a way that's more sophisticated as the fraud schemes become more sophisticated, frankly, by bad actors making fraudulent Medicaid claims. Minnesota didn't just lose money, we lost the confidence that the money we're spending is going to our neighbors and loved ones for life-saving and life-enhancing medical care. We can't let the cloud of fraud hang over the good work that's being done every day, and we can't let that hang around one day longer than necessary. This week, we're making a call out to Minnesota's 40,000 state employees, and we need 168 people from across the state to come into DHS and help us perform unannounced site visits.
Sounds reasonable, obviously. Try to stop the bleeding, verify the providers, and then resume payments. Except there's just one massive problem.
You're subjected to these 90-day waiting periods now for reimbursements. You have a $250,000 bi-weekly payroll, 120 employees, hundreds of clients, many of them children, obviously, 5 facilities. What is that going to do to your business?
Potentially kill it if something doesn't change. This last week, I should have gotten $212,000 for the payment this week, which would have covered my payroll. So I had to infuse my own money in for payroll this week. And obviously, if I have to wait 90 days, that's a whole quarter. And even when that 90-day hits, I'll only get the 2 weeks that just happened.
The legitimate providers, the ones with actual buildings, actual staff, actual kids, they have real expenses and they can't wait 90 days for the payment. And this is the sick irony of all this. The fake centers, the fraudsters, the ones that were building kids that don't exist, of course, they're not affected by this at all because they don't have payroll to cover. They don't have therapists to pay. They don't have facilities to truly maintain. The state's solution to fraud is only hurting the people who are not committing the fraud. So let's talk about some numbers from this one facility, Holland Center, run by a woman named Jennifer, who has been in business since 2004. She has 120 employees. Her bi-weekly payroll is $250,000. She serves over 200 children across 5 facilities, and she's operated for 20 years with a spotless record. This week, she should have received $212,000 to cover payroll. She got zero. She had to use her own personal money to make payroll happen. And even when that 90-day hold lifts, she'll only get paid for those initial 2 weeks. The rest, she's still behind. She's accumulating $250,000 in unpaid bills every 2 weeks.
Obviously, for those of us who've been doing this for me 20 plus years or others 10 plus years, have had the spot audits, have been, shown that we have ethical, long-standing, good reputations, let us continue to serve. There's no reason that my funds should be held up when I've done everything right because a bunch of people stole money. Because the people who aren't going to get hurt are in the fake centers because they don't have any people. So it's really, I think the only thing that I could come up with is a trusted provider program to just let some of us continue to do the good work we do.
Because yeah, if something doesn't happen, from my understanding, you're pretty much going to shut all of these facilities down next week.
Yeah, that's probably right.
She's looking at bankruptcy next week. 20 years of providing quality care to disabled kids, 20 years of passing every audit, 20 years of doing everything right. And now she's going to go under because Tim Walz administration couldn't prevent this fraud in the first place. Tim Walz and the Attorney General Keith Ellison couldn't be bothered to investigate the fraud so this type of thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, across the state, it's probably 30 to 40,000 children that could be affected. No, the kids, I don't know where they'll go because the kids that we take are often the kids that the schools can't take, because they have too many problem behaviors. They don't know how to handle them. They end up being sent home all the time. They end up being restrained at some points. So there's going to be nowhere for them to go. They're going to have to go back into their parents' homes, and the parents then, parents who are working will have to stay, and so it disrupts their entire income because if the mother or father have to stay home to take care of the child because they don't have a facility. And nobody wants fraud. I don't want fraud. I pay taxes. But this isn't the way to stop fraud. Isn't to stop the services of truly disabled individuals, to stop the fraud, because all you're doing then is really putting the burden of the fraud that took place on disabled individuals. So the people who will pay will be the disabled children, their families, disabled adults, and whoever takes care of them.
30 to 40,000 children across Minnesota could lose services. These aren't kids who could just transfer to public schools. These are kids who need one-on-one specialized care. The kind of care that costs the state less than public school, public education programs, by the way. And it's more effective. When those centers close, parents will have to quit their jobs to stay home with their kids. Families will lose income. Kids will lose a therapy that actually was working for them. And this is the part that just makes everyone furious. This was all preventable if Tim Walz actually did something and actually gave a damn about the fraud that was happening in his state.
So, Corin, what do we know about the vulnerabilities those schemes exploited and how the state might be able to fix them?
Tim, honestly, the answer to that is not a lot. This report actually does identify vulnerabilities in all of the programs, and it gives recommendations to fix all of those vulnerabilities. The only problem is I can't see them. They're all redacted, every single one of them.
Tim Walz has been the governor since January 2019, 7 years. Keith Ellison has been Attorney General since January 2019, 7 years. The fraud in Minnesota's programs, it has been there the entire time. Feeding Our Future started in 2020. The housing fraud, the daycare fraud that the auditors warned back in 2015. Multiple warnings, multiple opportunities to tighten oversight, multiple chances to write clear policies that would make fraud harder and verification easier. And what happened? Absolutely nothing. Actually worse than nothing. When the Department of Education tried to slow down Feeding Our Future payments because something looked off, the nonprofit sued them for racial discrimination and the state backed down. The state auditor's office found that the threat of legal consequences and negative media attention affected the state's decision-making about regulatory action. They were more afraid of being called racist than they were about being robbed.
I just got to ask you, just straightforward here, not a single bureaucrat or commissioner has been fired throughout all of this fraud. Like, what do you have to say about that?
Well, it's pretty upsetting. I mean, as a Minnesotan, even if I wasn't a provider for these services and going to have to shut down, as a Minnesotan, what is going on? Nobody ever gets fired. People can just blatantly let this happen. Billions of dollars in fraud happen, and they're all just sitting there collecting their paychecks while we're going to go under.
So we're talking about all these massive fraud numbers. Should any top government officials go to jail with this?
I would say that Governor Walz should at least step down right now.
At this point, not one state official has been fired over this. Not one commissioner has lost their job. The only victim you can say is Tim Walz because he's announcing that he's not going to run for a third term and he's basically done with politics. But that's it. That's all we've seen so far. Meanwhile, Jennifer, who hasn't paid herself in 20 years, who started this center for her own autistic son, who has a spotless record, she's going to file for bankruptcy. The people who caused this problem keep collecting their paychecks, and the people who did everything right are losing everything. This is the pattern that we saw in Minnesota that is leading to people losing everything. Weak policies, no oversight, fraud explodes. Warnings are getting ignored. And when the crisis finally becomes too big to ignore, the state's response punishes everyone instead of targeting the actual fraudsters. You want to know why legitimate providers are calling for a trusted provider program? It's system. If you have 10, 15, 20 years of clean audits, if the state comes in unannounced every year and you pass every time, why should your payments be frozen? The state knows who the legitimate providers are. They have the audit history. They have the data. They can create a fast track system for verified providers while investigating the suspicious ones. But that would probably require some competence. And competence hasn't been Minnesota's strong suit on this issue.
He wants to say something, you guys. A-N-K-Y. Thank you. Or the children. Done.
What was the message?
Thank you for coming. I am so worried about the children.
Here's what this really shows. When government fails at its most basic job, writing clear rules, enforcing those rules, stopping fraud when it's happening, innocent people pay the price. And the scammers, a lot of them already got their money and probably left the country. The problem is what happened to the kids who actually need the autism services? They're the ones who lose. And the providers who dedicate their lives to helping disabled children, they're the ones going bankrupt. And the politicians who let that happen, they continue to collect their pensions. When it comes to the Tim Walz administration, they failed at basic responsibility. And it's not just losing money, but you also destroy the people who are trying to do good work. You hurt the most vulnerable people in your state. And that's exactly what's happening in Minnesota right now. But let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.